Today on Seahawks Forever, one of my favorite segments that I do every year, Emry Hunt of CBS Sports and also author of Football Game Plan, one of the best scouting guides you will ever read. And hopefully after today, you'll go get it because you're going to want to dive in. Emry Hunt, he specializes really in casting a wider net than most of the other analysts you read. He turns over every stone, goes to every small school in the United States and in some cases in other countries. And so we're going to talk about some names that you might not have heard up until this point, some smaller school players who might fit what the Seahawks are doing. He's also got some other thoughts on what's happening in Seattle as well. I know you're going to want to hear it. Emry Hunt coming up next.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Shout out to the folks at Doer for sponsoring this program. Doer is built for doing. Flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles. Lifestyle apparel for every occasion. And my personal favorite, I wear them almost every day, are these stretch performance jeans. 20% stretch. Some of the bigger names that are more recognizable that have been making jeans for over 100 years, wink, wink, they only have 5% stretch. These things are incredibly comfortable, but they're also built tough. They are built for doing. And right now you can get 20% off your first order at shopdoer.com/forever. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/forever for 20% off your first order. All right, you guys, welcome back. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you don't already. I was studying some analytics on the channel the other day and found something really interesting, that of all the viewers that I get on a regular basis, that only half of you are subscribed. And so all you have to do is just click that subscribe button, and then you'll always know, especially if you hit that bell for notification. But even if you don't do that, you'll get my new content when I put it out on an almost daily basis in your search on YouTube. It'll come up and remind you that there is new content. So be a subscriber. It's the best way that you can support the program, actually, without spending a penny. All the other ways you can support the show are down below in the description. All right, let's get to this. This is my conversation today with Emry Hunt of CBS Sports and the Football Game Plan Scouting Guide. All right, Emry, it's always good to have you on. We were just chatting before I hit record about how you get to kind of calm down a little bit. You get to be at home, but now you have to do all of this and talk about your guide. And the thing that I always appreciated about your guide is you scout the small schools, even Canada, even the UFL. You go to all the smaller all-star games that some fans aren't even aware of, harder than anyone. Is that something that became natural to you because you played football at a smaller school, or was that something where you caught the bug for that kind of early on in your scouting days?
It's a little bit of both, man. And it's always found, if you even date back to playing video games as a kid, right? I remember, having the NCAAs. I think it was my senior year in high school. So that would mean NCAA 98 came out. And so I remember, we're playing, obviously I'm getting recruited at the time, going through the whole process, but you're playing a game. And at the end, they only had 4 bowl games at the time. And then they had the East-West Shrine Bowl. Like, so if you had a good player, he can get to the East-West Shrine Bowl, which at the time was still being played at Stanford Stadium in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
So it was just like, man, it's cool. Like, how cool it'd be to get an all-star game. And then as you get older and you're getting into this industry, you know about the Senior Bowl, you know about the Shrine Game. And then when the Hula Bowl moved stateside, it was like, oh, perfect. And then the NFLPA game was out, and it was like, man, it's like, if these guys are worthy enough of getting calls to an all-star game, I will be doing the draft a disservice by not going to the all-star games, because yes, anybody can go to the senior and Shrine and just stop there and then go to the combine and think they've seen all. But we know the draft is so deep and the rosters are so transient that they'll draft somebody or sign someone afterwards from whatever school that played in one of these all-star games. Like, man, who is this guy? How come nobody's hit? That's where I came in. Like, boom, here's someone from the NFLPA Bowl. Here's someone that played the Tropical Bowl, and so on and so forth. So it's part passion, but also part of doing right by the work.
How much do you weight the film versus everything that you see in January, February, and March up until today?
It's different, because if you are a G5 or Power 5 player, the film trumps everything. But if you're a small school guy, you kind of want to, I'm sorry?
It's hard to find.
Right. Well, no, here's the thing with the film with the small school guy. You want to see them versus the group of 5 power 5 guy. So you won't see that you won't get that question answered unless you go to an all-star game. So case in point, there was a tight end that I saw at the College Gridiron Showcase, Mitchell Van Voren from St. Norbert, a Division III program. And had I just focused on his Division III film, I'd have been like, okay, this is cool. He does all these things really well. But am I just watching him dominate Division III, or is he really good? Well, you get that answer at an all-star game because he's going up against guys that played at Nevada, guys that played at Mississippi State. So you can see the one-to-one. Okay, so what I saw on film checks out. And so now you have a better gauge of how athletic he is, how talented he is when you go and watch the film because you've seen him against upper-level competition.
How much during the process do you have to kind of scout yourself? And what I mean by that is your rankings always look so much different to me than the other major draft guides that are out there, that you're more open-minded about including prospects in your rankings, that some of them weren't even invited to the combine or didn't play in some of the major all-star games. How hard is that to do, to tune out kind of the consensus and forge your own path?
You got to trust what you see and trust your own work. And that's why when you go back through time of me doing this since 2000, I've had football game plans since 2007, started grading prospects exclusively since 2009. So if you go back to then and work your way forward, when you're right or wrong on a prospect, you know it's based off what you see and not what you're hearing. So that's how you get, hey, man, Russell Wilson is my number 3 quarterback with a first-round grade in the class that has Andrew Luck and RG3. People are like, oh, Tannehill should be, he's the third, and this is, but no, Russell Wilson's the guy. And then it pays off when you see how Russell Wilson's career has gone, future Hall of Famer. And then when you look at the Lamar Jackson class, you look at the Patrick Mahomes. I showed my handwritten report at the time because I didn't put out a draft guide. I put out the handwritten notes on YouTube. I had a high, he was 1B in my class with Deshaun Watson with a high 90 grade. And when everybody was like, he's not going to translate, when every other major analyst, draft analyst, had Mitch Trubisky number 1. Like, what are we even doing? So when you do the work yourself, you know what you're probably hearing is groupthink. So just block all it out and just focus on what you see, how you grade, and let the chips fall where they may.
And I think the most high profile example of where that shows up for you is your quarterback rankings always look unique and they look different than everyone else's quarterback rankings. And in most years, that even includes, I know last year there were some players in your top 10 I had never heard of and had to go look for after reading your guide. This year, the names are more recognizable, but that doesn't mean they're all players that most expect to be drafted at all, let alone high. And so I put together like a list of, I think these are your top 8, and it's a good example. I mean, you've got Sanders and Ward at the top like everybody else, and then Milroe, and we'll talk about those guys in a minute. But then a guy like Brady Cook sliding right in there at number 4. You've got a grade of 76 on him. All these guys are kind of grouped together at 75 and 76. And on your grading scale, that means solid NFL starter. What is it you see in Brady Cook that maybe the others don't?
The toughness, man, the innate toughness. I remember when I first got introduced to Brady Cook was when he was coming in for injured Connor Basilick against Arkansas. At the time, Arkansas was ranked, and it was like, man, Missouri may not win this game. It was a Friday game, I believe, late in the season, and he led those guys scrappiness to victory. And I was like, wow, Brady Cook got some athleticism because it was the run game from him that kept Arkansas off balance. And so when you look at Brady Cook and how his career played out, the toughness, the ability to rise above bad plays early in the game or whatnot. I go to the game this year versus South Carolina, how he drove them down the field to get what we thought was a game-winning touchdown, and we saw how South Carolina came roaring back because of the defense of Missouri. But when you look at Brady Cook and how he played, him getting carted out the game against Auburn, then come back running out the hospital full pad, like Tecmo Bowl to lead them to victory, right? So that stuff is what you appreciate about Brady Cook. And then he goes to the East-West Shrine Bowl, has a very good week there, arguably the best week. Then he goes to the Combine, test out great athletically, and I thought had the best throwing session of all the quarterbacks there. And so it's funny to see people not talking about Brady Cook, but when they rewatch and watch it, like, man, I didn't know he was this athletic. Or wow, he's actually putting the ball on the. And so that's why Brady Cook to me is someone that's being criminally underrated. Reminds me a lot of Andy Dalton at TCU.
There you go. And Dalton was a guy early. It was the beginning of the Pete Carroll, John Schneider era here in Seattle that, they gave heavy consideration to drafting. It's interesting because after the throwing session at the Combine, Schneider was quoted as saying that on his radio show that he does here, that there were a couple of quarterbacks who threw it so well in Indianapolis, it caused them to go back to the tape again and dig a little deeper. And I assumed in that moment that Cook was one of the guys he might have been talking about, because I agree. I thought he threw it really, really well as Seth Hennigan. And that's another guy that a lot of fans throw his name at me. He's become kind of a fan favorite. And some of these fans probably didn't know who he was before the Senior Bowl. He throws the game-winning pass at the end there to Jack Bech. You look at his college statistics at Memphis, they're remarkably consistent. Yeah, I mean, you can almost copy and paste his 4-year stat line the whole time he was there. Pretty high completion percentage, pretty athletic guy, got some yards with his feet. In Mobile, he was interesting to me because I didn't think he looked that good in the practices, didn't do anything to stand out. And then on Saturday, he was clearly the best quarterback there. You give him a 75, that's solid NFL starter. But when you talk about these guys that aren't as high ranked, right, that aren't going to get the commitment that maybe quarterbacks need to make the jump from teams, what are the chances and how much do you weight when you give these grades on the likelihood that these players can become that player?
That's a great question, because you really can't, because now you're trying to get into the minds of the NFL team, which is bizarre because it's just 32 teams, 32 different mindsets and, and identities and thought processes. So you really can't play that game. I know a lot of draft analysts try to do that. Well, I like this guy, but he's probably not going to get drafted, so I'm not going to grade him, or I'm going to put him as a priority free agent. Like, no, if you like the guy, grade him. Because prime example, I love when I have examples from me doing this. If you go back to my 2017 class again, Trubisky wasn't even in my top 10. And so I had Watson, Mahomes, Deshaun Kaiser. Number 4, and this is the point I'm making, number 4 was P.J. Walker. Now, keep that in mind, right? P.J. Walker didn't get drafted, was on the practice squad of the Colts, on and off. It was the running joke. Every other week, he was getting released and re-signed, release, re-sign, release, re-sign, right? Then he goes to the XFL in 2020. So that's, 3 years removed from him being on an NFL roster. Balls out to where he's the XFL MVP and kills it, gets an opportunity, gets some starts, win some games. But no, and everybody was like, well, PJ Walker came out of nowhere. Well, if I go back to my initial scouting report, I was right. So that's why, because you never know when this guy is going to get an opportunity. Just make sure you have the report ready. So, yeah, if you grade the guy and you say he's a starter and he doesn't even get drafted or doesn't even play, hold on to the report, because you may not have been wrong. And we know it's always about opportunity. Just when that player gets that opportunity, you now have a report to show, hey, he should have gotten it years ago because I was right about what I saw on film from him and his traits and attributes.
And I think this leads perfectly back to, I just want to put your list back up here again. Jalen Milroe, maybe one of the most polarizing prospects in this entire draft. I just did an entire episode on him 2 days ago on the possibility of why he might fit in a place like Seattle, where they have an established starter, so he doesn't have to play early in his career, because that's kind of what derails some of these guys, right? They don't get practice reps anymore. It's kind of hard to develop the players. And so kind of tying back into the last question I asked you, when you look at Milroe, we all see the upside. We all see the traits. That's undeniable. But what do you think the chances are that he will become that player? Like, his boom or bust range is pretty wide, would you say?
Well, this is why I will believe in a guy like Milroe. And if you go back to a tweet I have back in August when I was on Inside College Football on CBS, and they asked me my top 5 quarterbacks in college football, and I had Shedeur, Cam, Milroe, Cook, and Caden Salter, and then Brady Cook, right? But Salter went back, transferred to Colorado, so that pushes up to 4. But Milroe is right there at 3, and the reason why I will always bet on a guy like Milroe, I'll start here first. One, you could tell he cares about his craft and works on his game, because when Milroe hit the field in 2022, we were like, I don't even know if this dude's going to end up at the same position. It wasn't good. And then 2023, We saw them go through the whole quarterback controversy. He got benched for the South Florida game. They almost lost that. They went back to him after that game. They go on a run where there was like, we can't win without this guy. Had the fourth down and forever Hail Mary, not Hail Mary, but it was like a dime throw to the back corner end zone to Isaiah Bond to beat Auburn. And they go to the SEC title game. He outplays Carson Beck, that everybody was saying was the QB1 or whatever. He outplayed him, won the SEC title, got to the postseason, and did a good job versus Michigan, where we know that play call at the end where he got stuffed on 4th and 1 that was trying to go in for the game-winning score. So, listen, that shows he worked on his game. And also, this year, the turnovers were higher, but the touchdowns stayed the same. So you could kind of attribute half the turnovers to bad play, but also working in through a new offense with Kalen DeBoer. So the guy was getting better and has gotten better every season. On top of that, as a college football Hall of Fame voter, I'm a member of the National Football Foundation. So I've attended a lot of these William B. Campbell Trophy presentations. I remember this was, I want to say 2016 or 17. I was at the one where Sam Benger, who was a tremendous tailback for Carnegie Mellon, like should have been playing pro ball, right? And so he was, I was interviewing him. He was telling me like, man, I like what you're doing, like TV. I like, bro, you have a 4.5 in molecular biology. Like, you're gonna be great in life. Like, don't even worry about what I'm doing. Saying interviewing you. But that's the type of grades and majors these kids have. So that's why you see schools go crazy when they have a semifinalist. So the fact that this kid in Milroe won the academic Heisman as a starting quarterback at a Power 5 program, working through the navigation of having to be a star quarterback at a premier blue blood program while also taking care of business in the classroom, man, you bet on that guy. You double down on that guy, because that's the guy that you kind of can see will do everything possible to make sure the team is playing good football.
Let's move on to another position. And then I want to stay on kind of the small school sleeper sort of track, just because, as we were talking a little bit before, it's just, by this point in the draft process, we've talked all these guys to death, and draft fatigue from an analytical standpoint definitely starts to set in. The wide receiver group has certainly changed here in Seattle over the last month. We all knew that Tyler Lockett was probably, they were going to move on from him this offseason. Just age, salary, just doesn't match up. But then the trade of DK Metcalf to Pittsburgh, and what fans always want, and you see this at every position group, but it's happening here when it comes to the receiver group, is they saw the unique skill set that DK had, just the freakish athletic traits and what he was able to do with those. Even in making up for some of his shortcomings as a receiver. And so they want to replace that, and they want to replace it with something that looks familiar. But especially in this new scheme that they're going to run with Clint Kubiak, this Shanahan scheme, is that necessary? Do you need like that traditional big, tall, fast X to play on the outside, or can you get by with some other different stylistic types?
I feel like folks look at types, and that's why I love breaking down a wide receiver group like I do, because people will see a short guy and say slot. People see a big guy and say X, when really you can have a big guy that could play inside as a slot, and a shorter guy, and we've seen this over the course of history, that could play outside like Steve Smith as an X. So the size doesn't matter, it's the skill set. And if the skill set is meshed with good size, then yeah, you kind of want that. It's a big man's game, right? Even though I say size is not a skill, I understand it is a big man's game. So if you can get the size with the skill combination, perfect match. But don't let the skill be usurped by a guy that just has size, because that's how you get a Stephen Hill thinking you got Randy Moss, right? Just because he's 6'5", totally two different players, and two different skill sets. So yeah, they could find a guy that's like DK Metcalf and play in this system, or they could find someone that's built like a Cooper Kupp and play in the system. So it really just depends on the skill set of the player. And therefore, I think when you are focused on positions, like how does the guy play the position, and then we'll see where he slots in said position.
Specifically, there's a lot of buzz here in the last week or so about Emeka Egbuka possibly being a target of the Seahawks, a guy that they like. He's from the area, certainly. But the immediate assumption among many is, well, he kind of looks like Jackson Smith and Jigba, went to the same school, obviously, but even body type is similar. And he gets pigeonholed as a guy that can only play slot. But could you see a scenario where Emeka Egbuka and JSN could coexist?
Man, we just saw it in the Rams with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Like no one batted an eye that both of these guys are playing essentially the same way. You just want these guys that are able to get open, make the catch, do something after the catch, and make things happen. We saw it, and I know I date myself when I draw back these references, but it's important because it shows you how long I've been watching the game and studying the game and appreciate the history. We saw it with the Smurfs. We saw it with the Marx brothers with Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. We saw it essentially with the posse. The only tall guy they had was Art Monk, but Ricky Sanders and Gary Clark are about the same size. And so the three amigos in Denver. So we've seen this before. As long as you're able to play the position and do what's necessary and do what's required of the position, it doesn't matter if both guys may look the same. And that's a part of helmet scouting and how they're built. And it's hard to do that, or it's hard to differentiate that because that's just human nature, because that's how we have survived so long as a species, by identifying and labeling things, right? It's no different. The guy coming out in 2026, Taylor Green, the quarterback for Arkansas, wears number 10. Man, the dude looks like Vince Young. It's hard to not say that because he's wearing 10, but I mean, it's human nature. So I'm not faulting fans, but we've seen the Rams do this before, and I think it'll be, if you have a chance to get Emeka Egbuka, then get him, pair him up with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and go do work.
Yeah, and even before Kupp, it was Robert Woods, and he was
exactly right.
Similar too. Yeah. All right. I would be doing a disservice to my viewers if I didn't talk about the offensive line. It has been such a source of consternation and focus here in Seattle. And, the thing that when fans get restless, they want solutions now. They're not very patient. And so, throughout the free agent period, we had to live with every single day. How come we haven't signed anyone today? How come we haven't signed anyone? And the message we're getting from John Schneider and his staff is, look, we've drafted more young offensive linemen in the last 3 drafts than any team in the league. We've invested draft capital in that position. You can't give up on those guys yet. And then they're going to lean into that. And so, in your evaluations last year, I know Michael Jarrell was someone you were high on because he showed up in your first round small school only mock last year. And Christian Haynes is another one. Seahawks took him at the 81st pick last year, and fans want to give up on him because the line as a whole didn't perform last year. Do those guys still have a chance, in your opinion, of developing into something worthwhile?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I said this. We did a live 1 hour mock on CBS Sports Network a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking at team needs, and folks were saying, "Oh, the Seahawks need this." I'm like, man, and they always take a step back when I give my pick or prediction or my analysis. Like, whoa, how could you say that? Like, man, we only focus on round 1 in every year, right? But there's numerous draft picks and signings. The guy that may be on the back end of the roster right now is probably a part of the plan of why they moved off on this veteran, because he's going to be the one to step in and start. And we can't just keep focusing on the first round. We got to give the guys in the rounds 2 through 7 a chance to develop and be a part of the mix. What if the answer is already on the roster? We don't know that. The coaches know that. That's why they're making moves around what is, the what you perceive as a roster. Man, why haven't they signed a guard yet? Well, maybe they feel like they got the answer already on the roster, a guy that's going to play that they drafted, cultivated, and developed. So I'm glad you said that, because we got to give these young guys a chance to get in, get acclimated to the system, get a chance to compete. Now, there's no downside in stacking talent, but if you drafted some guys the previous year, you're like, wait, why draft them if we're not going to even give them a chance to play and prove that they can't play? Let's give them that chance first.
And specifically with Christian Haynes, what were your thoughts on him coming out of Connecticut last year?
Listen, watching Connecticut under Jim Moore Jr., point of attack players on both sides of the ball. So if you have a good defensive line, by nature, you're going to have a good offensive line because they're going against each other in practice. And he was someone that was really good. I know some people had higher grades on him, but the fact that he was, where I had him and where he ended up going, that's good value. So that's that's a guy that has been well coached, has been consistently challenged, and going into a situation where he's going to, hey, now I'm in my second year as a pro, I know what is expected of me. I don't have to worry about the whole pre-draft off-season process of traveling around. Now I get to just focus on football. I think we'll see the best of him in year 2.
You love scouting smaller schools, as we've discussed, and I'm going to show a couple of names here in a minute from this year's small school only mock draft that you did, specifically a very interesting guy that you have going to the Seahawks. But one prospect this year that fans here have all fallen in love with is Gray Zabel. Again, another example of a guy that before Mobile, none of them even knew who he was. and now he's like, if you don't take Gray Zabel at 18, they should fire the GM and everyone involved. But it's, Gray Zabel's a great prospect. I love watching him in Mobile, and certainly along with a lot of other fans, I think I'd be happy if he was the choice there. But gosh, you look at North Dakota State is what we're talking about right here. And Dylan Radin's before him, Cody Mock before him. And we talked a little bit, you shared with me that Jalen Sundell was your 11th ranked center last year for the Bison. He goes undrafted. The Seahawks get him, and he's a guy that they really like. And I'm not so sure he doesn't end up beating out Olu Oluwatimi for the starting center job this year. What is it in your experience of watching that program? How do they keep producing all these offensive linemen that are so good?
That's a great question. And there's a layered issue or reason why. I won't say issue, but they play a lot like Kansas State. And but here's why North Dakota State has been able to lock in like they have been. Part one is location. So if you think about where North Dakota is located, they butt up against Minnesota. The reason why I bring that up, Minnesota only has one FBS program in the state. So with all those high schools and all those kids that are playing, if you're not going to the University of Minnesota, it's a free fall for schools everywhere because there's no FCS program either. So the Division II programs in Minnesota are eating. That's why you see a lot of great prospects at Minnesota State, Minnesota Moorhead, MSU, all those schools, right? Before they closed their football program, St. Cloud State had a bunch of these good linemen as well. So now, if you are butting up against Minnesota and you have a Division I FCS caliber offensive lineman, man, where can I play Division I ball? North Dakota State. And so they grab those guys. And by North Dakota State being the one of the two only FCS programs, so Division I programs is obviously University of North Dakota, you get the best of that state. You just got to compete with North Dakota. And when you think about that and the fact that they have now had a track record of producing guys, now those kids from Nebraska, which is in the same situation as Minnesota, like, man, there's Nebraska and then there's D2 programs or NAIA programs. So now they get some of the best from Nebraska, some of the best from Minnesota. They cultivate their own. It's no surprise that they are funneling to Fargo, North Dakota. And when you have that success of on the field play, the development of these guys, it's why they turned out linemen year after year after year.
It's funny you mentioned that. You take me back many, many years to when I was in Bismarck covering sports. And I used to always kind of say, only half jokingly, that, you talk about the geography and it's an inventory issue, right? Like there's so many small colleges, also 4-year colleges in that whole range, that I used to say that if you just start for a year as a point guard on your high school basketball team, you're getting at least a half scholarship somewhere. It's not a bad way to pay for your education.
And think about it, because when there's been talk of like teams like Augustana moving up to Division I FCS, which they should. But that's why location is key, and they are in a great spot. They're not, that's why in those southern schools they tend to have a lot of skill players, but in the Midwest, you're like, oh wow, we got our picks and chooses of the bigger guys. Plus, there's not a lot of Division I programs in this footprint that are FCS programs, so we could kind of cultivate and really hash it out with some of these big boys.
All right, I want to put some of these names up on the screen, and I will, for those watching, I will put the link to his mock draft that only drafts from small schools. It's one of most fun exercises you do every year. I'll put that link down below. But specific, and the odds that any of these guys will become Seahawks are pretty low, especially in the last few years. They seem to have shifted their priorities. They tend to take players from bigger programs. That wasn't always the case, though. This is just a sampling of some guys that are in your top 20 in your small school only mock draft. You talked about, well, no, I think that was off air. Actually, we talked about Taylor Elgersma, Canadian quarterback that was down at the Senior Bowl. But your first pick in the draft is a guy I'd never heard of before I'd seen your guide, Zach Zabrowski, which sounds like a made up name, right? It does, from Central Missouri. But then down, and I put the asterisk next to Dominic Piazza, interior offensive line, McGill. If you don't know where McGill is, it's in Canada. And the reason I highlighted him is because he's who you had going to Seattle at 18. And again, I'll put the link to the YouTube video down below because I hesitate to show it when I post-produce this show because I, copyright issues and whatnot. It's fun tape. Guy's 6'2", and he was playing left tackle for 4 straight years and dominating at the Canadian level. What makes you think that he can be an NFL player?
Well, when you look at his pass protection, he kind of has the perfect setup for a guard. His hands stay inside. He's able to play the piano, and pass guys off that's stunning and moving across the front. And also just stonewalls guys. Because in Canada, you're playing a yard off the ball, so you get a bit of a head start. That's a harder pass rush than someone that's right up on you because you can get your hands on them right away. So you got to have a little bit of patience, but also the judicious nature of getting your hands first on a defensive lineman. So he was able to excel there. Then he tested well at the CFL Combine, so he shows you the requisite footwork and 3-cone, all that stuff like that. The agility drills he did really well in. I think, to me, that screams kick down inside and be a stellar left guard, or even a center if you move him down even more so because of how quick his reaction is, which means he could hold up at the point of attack. It's always good to see these Canadian guys in the States because at an all-star game, because they have to get acclimated to a guy being not a yard off the ball. So it takes them a day to really get, okay, wow, this is happening quick. And once they get acclimated, their natural skill sets take off. So that's why, when we saw the other kid from UBC that was on the list, Arvin Hosseini, was, he was in those UBC guys, a couple of UBC guys that went down to the States and participated in all-star games. It was like, okay, these dudes got it. They were able to get up to speed, and next thing you know, they're off and running.
Yeah, it's fun to watch him. He plays almost like he thinks it's a rule that you have to get your guy on the ground when after the ball is snapped, which is it's a lot of fun to watch. One name on here that fans will recognize because he's getting a lot of attention, even as a small school guy, and a guy who doesn't fit a traditional archetype as far as his physical stature, is David Walker, the edge from Central Arkansas. I'm seeing as high as 3rd-round grades on this kid. And the reason that maybe he's not higher is he's only 6 feet tall, but the motor and the production from this kid, and he really stood out in Mobile as well. I could see him fitting into a Mike Macdonald defense, especially following some of the comments he had at the Combine where he talked about how they don't have a cookie cutter template for how they view their defensive players. What is it about David Walker that stands out?
That he dominated his level of competition, but also went down to the Senior Bowl where we talked about, obviously when you watch him against Arkansas State, you're like, okay, cool. And against Oklahoma State the year before, you're like, all right, so this tape that I'm watching is clean because he's got 2 games versus FBS opponents, 1 Power 5, 1 G5. So he was able to check those boxes, get that question answered. But then to go down to the Senior Bowl, high stressful situation where as a small school guy, you better perform. And he did that, was one of the best defensive linemen there. And the fact that he came in measured undersized was even more impressive because watching his tape, you just assume he was 6'4", 250, right? He came in 6'1", 260 something. So it's kind of like Brandon Graham, that shorter, squatty defensive end, but is able to have great body control, convert speed to power well, and has a knack for closing on the quarterback and getting them down. So yes, Mike Macdonald would love a guy like that because we saw a lot of those Pernell McPhee type guys in Baltimore that predated Macdonald, but also part of that whole type of system that they were trying to run down there in the Queen City.
Another thing we're trying to do here in Seattle is find a fullback. We haven't needed one for quite some time. They were a big part of the Seahawks history all the way up and through the Mike Holmgren era anyway, and then kind of went away. But with Clint Kubiak back in town now as the offensive coordinator, they are actively seeking one. And it seems to me that those guys are harder and harder to find. Like there's one really good fullback I've seen in college, Max Bredesen from Michigan, and he's not coming out until next year. So they got to find one somewhere else. And as we were talking before the show here, you even have a hard time finding those guys. And in fact, didn't even have a category in your guide for them this year because not many teams use them. So how do you go about trying to identify players who could be fullbacks?
You look at the H-back position, which is kind of that versatile tight end spot that you can kind of see a guy perhaps playing a fullback. I know Harold Fannin was getting looks in the backfield at the Senior Bowl. Remember that? And so that's one way they could kind of find a fullback, get him on the move, and kind of get a good running start blocking on the perimeter. But also, and this ties directly into Mike McDonald and what he's been around. You know what they had in Baltimore, right? They had big number 42, Patrick Ricard, who was a defensive lineman at Rhode Island. So you will see that. And there's one guy that I really like for that conversion, Jelani Stafford, who played at UConn and was a defensive tackle, nose guard type, nose tackle, one tech upfield, penetrated about 6 feet, 300 pounds. But here's the kicker. In high school, he was an all-state tailback. So at UConn, he has like 6 rushing touchdowns. So they used to give him the football inside the 5-yard line, and he run in. So those are the types of guys, and his write-up is in the draft guide. So you'll see a guy like that has good athleticism, good quickness, used to carry the football. That's where you can get kind of 2 and 1. You know, okay, we got a guy that can be a rotational Puna Ford type on our defensive line, but in short yardage goal line situations, get on this side and either go kick out that defensive end or here tote this rock and push forward for this 1 yard, 4th and 1, 4th and inches. And that's type of guys. That's where your scouts really do their homework, and they say, okay, this guy got running back experience. You see his small ankles, big calves. He could run. He could move. He's got agility. Okay, we can kind of convert him. The kid from I forgot his last name, but his first name we call him Chidobe or Chidiz from Colorado. He's another shorter, squatty nose tackle, was at the Hula Bowl, and he was another one that may be undersized but has good quickness to where you can say, hey, you can be this sort of Patrick Ricard for us on offense if he was able to convert. I want to make sure I get his name correctly because I don't want to butcher it.
Sure.
Because this is a kid that really stood out at the Hula Bowl, and I'm watching him like, well, maybe this guy can be one of those converts, because we know the NFL loves to be petty and not really give shorter guys an opportunity because they love to say, well, he doesn't fit our pedigree of what we're looking for, and all of those things are not exactly what makes you a good football program. Chidozie Nwankwo.
Okay.
5'11", 307.
Wow. Okay. He's kind of giving JJ Pegues a run for his money there.
There's another one. Like I gotta tweak this out too. There was a moment I was grading this tape, and they were playing Kentucky, and they had him in a big bone formation where he was a quarterback, the Wildcat, and there was 2 D linemen alongside of him. And I'm like, I would have called, if I was a cornerback, I'm calling timeout and pointing up at that press box with a offense like, you wrong for this. Like, there's no way we stopping this 4 down situation. You got a big D tackle in the Wildcat with 2 D linemen that's gonna be his lead blockers. Like there's no way. So that's type of stuff you like to see. But Pegues is another one. In fact, I don't know if you stayed around during the combine when the D lineman went, but as the second group was coming in, Pegues stayed a little bit later because he was running routes as a tight end, as a fullback. So
man, they announced him at his pro day as an offensive weapon, I think. Yeah, someone suggested to me that, as much as the Seahawks have had issues on 3rd down and in the red zone the last couple of years, just put Byron Murphy in at fullback and JJ Pegues as your tailback.
I'm with it.
Goal line.
Sign it up.
couple other questions before I let you go. What was your evaluation of Sam Darnold when he came out?
He was my number 2 quarterback behind Lamar Jackson. Sam Darnold, I had Lamar Jackson with a 90 grade. Sam Darnold I had with a 79 grade. And the comp I had for Sam Darnold was Tony Romo. I felt like, Sam was someone that was super athletic on the move, can, dip and dab out of the pocket, keep his eyes downfield and make some crazy plays, right? You just wanted him to rein in versus pressure and rein in some of the turnovers, because they used to come in punches like James Winston. Like, it wasn't like one-offs. It'll be a game where he had none, or then the next game he'll have 3. And it's like, man, like he gotta flatline that. And so last year I was happy to see him really be the prospect that everybody thought he was going to be in Minnesota. And I think that's where it was cool. But again, going back to why you have to hold on to your evaluation, you read the strengths and weaknesses or areas of improvements. And you're like, man, like, what is it? And having covered him when he was out here in New York, going to those Jets games and going to the post game press conferences, when he was starting to build towards something, he'd get hurt. And now you have to hit reset. Then you have to start all over again, get hurt, hit reset. So last year, it was great to see him just play without injury and just play and build on stuff, go through the ups and downs, but still he was moving like, how you want your portfolio to move. Like, it'll go through some bumps, but you want to keep going in an upward trajectory. And I thought that was great for him last year. I was happy for him.
Before I let you go, you were one of the first people really ever who does this to have a YouTube channel back in the day. I was 2008, 2009, something like that, right?
Yep.
Could you ever have known back then, or did you in your vision even think that this would be the future of where it would end up, where people basically watch YouTube for television now and we're all doing this?
Man, that's a dope question, because during that time, I was so proud of what I was producing, right? Because I was like, man, we got to make it look like TV. We got to wear suits. We got to have the helmets out in front. And I got the mini helmets, and I had the suit on. And you could tell the backdrop was in my apartment. I just had blackout curtains with, I had blackout curtains covering this desk right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, man, but to me, it looked big time. And so I used to feel I was proud of what I was doing. So when people ask, hey, what are you doing? Like, oh man, I got a football show. And you're like, oh, what station, what channel? I like, it's on YouTube. Like, oh, it's on YouTube. And it's like, damn, you know what I'm saying? And then in 2011, we added podcasting before anyone was doing podcasting. And I was so proud of that, because we had call-ins and I was like, man, I got a radio show. It was like, what station? I was like, well, is it on Blog Talk? They're like, oh, it's a podcast. Oh, and now fast forward to where we are today and look at everybody, and so it's been dope to see me be ahead of the curve and not be afraid to step out and do stuff when everybody was so focused on the time of writing articles. And I was doing video content. And what was cool about it was that it helped me get my 10,000 hours. So by the time 2014 hit, I'm doing college games on TV. I'm doing Georgetown football games. I'm doing games in the PSAC, right? And then next thing you know, I get tapped to do stuff for CBS, and I'm on CBS. And when I remember the first time I got hired by CBS, I was on CBS for like 2018, but got hired officially in 2020. And I went in studio for the first time. It was like the Thanksgiving slate of games in 2021, I believe. And so I'm sitting in there, and we go through a segment, and the producer in the back was like, man, you got experience in TV? I was like, bro, I've been doing
right
camera work since 2009. Wow. Like this easy. I ain't got to set nothing up. Like this, like all I do is talk ball. I know what camera to look at, because I ain't got to set it up. Like I ain't got to worry about lights. I ain't got to worry about sound. Everything. I just get to sit down and talk ball. So I am embracing this new role. But to wrap up your question, I do like how now what I was getting ridiculed about back then is now the norm. And I was doing it before it became popular.
Well, I appreciate you always making time to hop on the show here after such a busy draft season. I will let you get to the rest of the car wash, as you call it, as you move on to your next one. For everybody watching, I will put the link in the description as well to get his draft guide. It is well worth every penny. Emry Hunt, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Appreciate you as always, man. Thanks for having me.
That was a fun conversation. This happens with many guests that I have on the show, but with Emry especially, like there's so many rabbit holes we could have gone down. I could have had him for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and it would have felt like the 30 minutes that we just did, but he has other interviews to get to. So definitely check out his draft guide. That link will be down below, as well as I promised, the links to that prospect from Canada. I want to get that name right again. Dominic Piazza. Dominic, if my mouse will work. Domenico Piazza, 6'2" out of McGill. It is fun tape. He plays left tackle. He's circled in all the videos, and just watch his pass protection, how he likes to bury guys in the ground. He's a lot of fun. I don't know that he'll be a Seahawk because they do tend to like the bigger school guys, but if he should end up at least being an undrafted free agent, get excited because he's a fun guy to watch. If you want to continue watching me, hit that subscribe button and the bell for notification of future episodes. All the ways you can support the channel are listed down below at Seahawks Forever on Blue Sky and Twitter. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys.